It took us 20 years of struggle to get the disability law passed in 2006. 20 years of struggle. 20 years after the Act 715, I think that the development has not been anything much to talk about because a lot of issues have not been touched.
Ghana Federation of Disability Organizations, GFD, presents The Unfinished Promise, From Act to Action, a documentary commemorating 20 years of the Persons with Disabilities Act, Act 715.
In 2006, Ghana passed the Persons with Disabilities Act, Act 715, a historic promise of dignity, access, and opportunity. Act 715 set out fundamental rights to education, healthcare, employment, and accessible public spaces, aiming to build an inclusive nation. 2 decades later, that promise remains incomplete.
When it comes to accessibility is basic.
Alexander Tete of CEPD and member of the Disability Act Review Technical Committee speaking.
Creating public spaces or public buildings to have ramps and lifts is a basic thing you can do for persons with disabilities. There are more complex things that we can demand. But as far as creating ramps and ensuring that high-rising buildings have lifts is basic.
The ramp is serving the needs of only persons with physical and mobility challenges.
Moses Fojo, Acting Deputy Executive Director of GFD, speaking.
How about those who have low visions? The issue of color combination, color contrast is so bad. You get into buildings and you realize that even right from the entrance, it's all glass. There's no caution tape to say this is a glass window. So somebody who has a low vision can easily bump into it. And when you do the discussions, it's more like, okay, we did not even know that this is part of what constitutes accessibility. So accessibility is very broad.
We thought that when the law was passed in 2006, everything will fall in place. Because after the law was passed, there was also the accessibility standard, which was enacted.
Getting access to the standards itself is quite challenging. It's quite a bulky document. You need to purchase it also from the standards authority. So it's not a document that is readily available. So really speaking, if the government had meant to use it as a tool to bring about social change or environmental changes, then they could have factored in the issue of accessibility. It should have been a free document that you could visit any of the site and download. But as it stands now, it looks like it's a privilege when you get access to it.
The old law gives a moratorium of 10 years. After the enactment of the Act in 2006, all new buildings from that point in 2006 will have accessibility features. But old buildings will have 10 years moratorium.
People did not abide by it. A recent study that we did, I can tell you that we have less than 25% of such structures seeing any retrofitting efforts being done.
The cost of this unfinished promise is not abstract. Every single day, a lack of institutional commitment continues to limit the lives, the independence, and the dignity of persons with disabilities across Ghana.
Disability just need the Ghana had the Yajuma. Yes, Solomon. Ghana have found the disability just need Juma.
Dorcas Enima, a person with a physical disability, speaking.
Kuromo fa Eddie. Because Krom tell me I'm not looking. You went in a papa, want me for which any vessel. Bidway, Brox lay you home to go down. Just say, oh, to me for 20 10 yam cookuma. I'm a cast and I'm Lord Crane. Dangerous.
Mental condition, we go with drugs. Without drugs, we can't do anything. And secondly, our services.
Charlotte Ashiboy Mensah, a person with lived experience of a mental health condition, speaking.
All our medicines are not on health insurance, so most of the times you have to buy. For me, it's only carbamazepine that is on health insurance. And it's not always that when you get to the hospital you get it. Sometimes they may say now that they are ordering it and things, and the rest of it I have to buy. And if I don't have money, and my family or NGOs that help or individuals who have been helping me don't come in now, it's very difficult because my life depends on the medication. So every day I have to take it. If I don't get it, it's a problem. So if our medicine and services can be on health insurance, that would be a very good thing to me.
Beyond the daily struggle against physical barriers, a thorough gap analysis revealed serious discrepancies between Ghana's domestic laws and the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. In 2019, advocacy groups launched a coordinated effort to amend Act 715, seeking to align Ghana's laws with international human rights standards.
The gap analysis report came up with a lot of gaps associated with the Persons with Disability Act.
Doris Indebugre, Programs Manager of GFD, speaking.
For example, there were no provisions on women with disabilities, there were no provisions on children with disabilities, there were no provisions on employment, reasonable accommodation, accessibility provisions, including infrastructure, communication, and information. In addition, there were also no particular attention paid to support services such as guides or personal assistance for persons with disabilities. Above all, there was no strong enforcement mechanism for compliance.
Recommendations that we gave that 10% of employment quota should be given to persons with disabilities in both public and private institutions. We also submitted a lot of provisions for youth development. Because the old law did not make provision for youth, we made specific recommendations that will empower women with disabilities. We also talked about persons with disabilities in disaster situations. So we made those recommendations. And of course, we wanted to come in tandem with the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
So GFD is not seeking amendment of specific provisions, but rather an entire overhaul of the Act 715.
After years of sustained advocacy, mobilization, and lobbying, the amendment bill has reached a crucial milestone. Following review by the Attorney General, the bill has officially been submitted to Cabinet. This procedural step marks a vital turn in the legislative process.
Article 88 of the Constitution, the AG is the gatekeeper when it comes to development of various acts.
Humphrey Matekofi, lawyer and the Executive Director of the Mental Health Society of Ghana, speaking.
Basically, what the AG does through the legislation drafting division, review the bill which is being either amended or originating as a bill for the first time, because any law inconsistent with the supreme law of the country, which is the Constitution, is null and void. It is the reason why the legislation division of the Attorney General will have to review those bills and ensure that one is not inconsistent with the Constitution, it is not vague, there is clarity in definition. Because if, for instance, you are trying to define disability, there should be clarity in the definition, to the extent that in future, if even the court of law is supposed to decide on a matter relating to persons with disability, in trying to construe that definition, there should be clarity and no ambiguity. So that AG is very interested in finding out those definitions and meanings to make sure that they are clear and everybody understands it.
But even the most robust legal text remains powerless without clear enforcement. History shows that well-intentioned laws fail when they lack dedicated budgets, trained inspectors, and accessible complaints systems. Without clear legislative instruments or allies to enforce the details, the law remains trapped in legal uncertainty, leaving citizens on the ground to pay the price of delay.
The compliance notice as per, I think, section 54 of this current amended bill, is to the extent that the National Council for Persons with Disability will have some people at the district level, or some staff, who will be issuing compliance notice, more or less a demand notice. For instance, in a school where the buildings are not disability compliant, they can issue compliance notice drawing attention to public buildings and even private buildings. And then they can also ensure that once they issue notices, some days or time is given to those public institutions or public facilities to make the necessary retrofitting or adjustment to accommodate persons with disability.
What the new act is doing is that we're trying to also cure an old gap that we had in the current regime. The current regime, as we speak now, officially does not have a legislative instrument to back the Disability Act. So a lot of the things are not operationalized for interpretation. So even if you take somebody to court, you may argue, but if you get somebody who wants to be quite litigant, he will also argue himself out. So what this new process is trying to cure is that we should not leave a gap. Once we have the law, we should have the legislative instrument to back it so that the operationalization will become clear and it will not leave any ways for ambiguities. Then that will be quite transformative.
To avoid these pitfalls, GFD and its partners are demanding a transparent and inclusive pathway forward. They are calling on the government to make the Cabinet's decisions public and share a clear timeline for the bill's journey to Parliament. Most importantly, they are urging the immediate re-engagement of the Technical Committee and organizations of persons with disabilities during the upcoming parliamentary review. For GFD, a strong, workable law is only possible if the people who wrote it are brought back to the table.
GFD remains committed to ensuring that the bill continues to reflect the needs of persons with disabilities. We are yet to receive copies of the bill presented to Cabinet. It is our expectation that copies of the bill as presented to Cabinet will be made available to GFD and the entire disability movement. It will also be appropriate for Parliament to provide GFD with copies once it is received from government for our study and final input.
We are happy to hear that the bill is at the Cabinet. All that we want is for Cabinet to expedite it.
Peter and Marco K, the Executive Director of GFD, speaking.
And once it gets to Parliament, our Disability Caucus in Parliament, we also encourage them to look at the bill and invite persons with disabilities to make final contributions to make sure that we are happy with the bill before it is passed. We encourage them to look at the best practices that will impact on the lives of persons with disabilities in the country. We already know that persons with disabilities are about 8% of our population, which represent about 3 million people. And so we need to make sure that this bill reflects their lives and makes impact in their lives. And we encourage them to do that for us.
Over the last 2 decades, Ghana has proven that progress is possible. Now, the challenge is to finish what we started, not with more unfulfilled promises, but with funded budgets, practical enforcement, and inclusive leadership. From act to action, the law can work, but only if policy, funding, and the voices of persons with disabilities move forward together.
This documentary was produced by Disability News GH and Adonai Studios for GFD.